Hi, everyone, and welcome to Make Business Better from Quartz. I'm Zach Seward, the co-founder and CEO of Quartz. Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, I've been talking with business leaders who are working to improve some slice of the business world, and more importantly, willing to come on here and share some tips and tricks and practical advice that all of us can apply in our own lives and jobs. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about inspiring the next generation of business leaders. And our guest is Khartoon Weiss. She's the head of global agency and accounts at TikTok, which both is full of employees and, of course, consumers who are part of that next generation of company leaders, commonly referred to as Gen Z. As always, we'll try to give you a rundown to start with the Quartz Essentials on the growth of both TikTok and Gen Z, and we'll bring in Khartoon to talk about her experience at the company and speaking to that new generation. And as always, focus as much as possible on those practical tips for how, whatever generation you're part of, leading and helping lead the next generation of business leaders across the country and the world. But as always, let's start with the Quartz Essentials. If we were doing this episode 2 years ago, the Essentials would have to start with like, what's TikTok? And but I'm going to assume that prior knowledge because as you can see in this chart, the explosive growth TikTok has had in the U.S. alone over the last 3 years, and in particular during the pandemic, which sort of caused a hockey stick growth of TikTok in the U.S. and a lot of other countries. I should say, that's a fairly U.S.-centric view of TikTok. That it had exploded and grown in both India and before that China, long before becoming mainstream in the U.S. But now, as with most global phenomena, now that it's reached mainstream dominance in the U.S., you see a lot of global brands paying more attention to TikTok. And a big reason for that is its user base is not just growing, but huge in one generation in particular. That's of course, an intense focus of so many consumer brands, and that's Gen Z. Gen Z already, or in the next few years, will already make up 25% of the global workforce. $150 billion in spending power in the U.S. alone. That's currently, and globally, 40% of consumers are already in Gen Z, and of course that will only grow. So to help us unpack all of that, maybe help us learn a little Gen Z speak, and certainly hear about how she's thinking about all of this in her own job, let's bring in our guest today, who again is Khartoon Weiss. Khartoon is the head of global agency and accounts at TikTok, responsible for TikTok's relationships with all the global holding companies and their portfolio of agencies, basically the whole ad business for TikTok US, if I understand it correctly. Is that a fair interpretation of your job?
It is accurate. I wouldn't say it's fair. I mean, there's a whole village and team of people that are on this, of course, but thank you for the gracious introduction. Good to be here, Zach.
Well, thanks for joining us. And you joined the company, was it around 6 months ago? So in the middle of the pandemic. That had to have been an odd experience, but an increasingly common one, I know.
Increasingly common indeed. Most of the organization joined within the last year. So we were about 65 people in the States when we went into the pandemic and have coasted over many, many hundreds. So I'm here about 10 months, which makes me an OG at the platform inside. And a lot of us are coming up on our 1-year anniversary, and most of us have actually never met in person, but we're all on the same mission, building the same thing. So it doesn't feel like there's been a big void. It has been a pretty warm and welcoming digital onboarding, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of companies, including us, had to get better at that very quickly, for sure. What I'm curious, actually, in that environment, how are you getting to know your coworkers that you've yet to meet in person? Is it obviously, I'm sure your normal work functions, but like, are you following each other on TikTok as part of the bonding relationship within the company, or are there other ways?
Well, there is no mandate to be a creator on TikTok. There is a mandate to bring your favorite TikToks and share them amongst our own team. So we try to understand what our cultural and contextual interests are. But I'll tell you, what we found to be probably the most successful within our organization is to, first and foremost, take time to build relationships, not the business. The business will come as a result of trusting each other. And the second thing I would say, that we've had to employ and that I employ personally in my leadership, which isn't something that I've ever really had to do from the onset. It's something I've done over time, is walk in completely vulnerable and walk in sharing like my fears, my challenges, my failures, and really just sitting there letting everybody know that I'm in my home, or currently right now, I'm in a hotel room in New York City. Like I'm in a strange environment. We are all in strange places. So how can we be vulnerable, trust each other as people? And that helps us build our tribes, that helps us build our business as a direct result of it. So leadership today has taken a different form in how we start the conversation, but it's ultimately led us to be in the same place as if we would have been in real life together.
It totally resonates with me. I mean, I feel like a lot of us we look to leaders, whether it's government leaders or within the company, basically to be told at a time like this, like, yeah, this is crazy. This is like things are not normal, and if you don't feel normal, or this is just, or just you feel unmoored, like that's totally understandable, and in fact everybody's going through something like that. Like just the like validation that's an okay feeling, or a very common feeling.
It's necessary. We have to create space for people to just feel their feelings. And that's not a millennial thing. That's not a Gen Z thing. That's not a Gen X, that's just a human thing in this conversation. And so if I sit there and look at my team and say, you're an adult, call what you need to. I trust you. And I know that you'll deliver, because this job has now turned into around the clock in your bedroom, in your living room, and amongst your like family dinner times. So you're an adult. Take the time you need, do what you need to do. But when you're in it and you're here, you're not alone, and let's build this thing together. So we're working really hard and we're really tired, but we're having a great time, and we're building something that we've never seen the likes of, speed and volume and velocity wise, if you would. So it's been an incredible ride. We're having an awesome time doing it. So I guess it's paying out.
Well, I don't want to indulge in too many generational stereotypes, primarily because I think most of them are kind of that bit and so forth. But we should at least stake them. I'll admit I'm a millennial, not just a millennial, but a geriatric millennial. I recently learned. When asked for precise age, but what generation do you identify with?
I'm a Gen X.
Gen X, and in the workforce, TikTok, I'm sure crosses a ton of generations. But what's the predominant generation you're working with day to day?
I'd say predominantly millennial into Gen X and Gen Z.
Okay, so it's pretty common for a tech company. Yeah. What is just I'm asking the question clearly because TikTok's such strong identification with Gen Z. I'm curious to what extent that bleeds into the company itself, not the app and usage of it, but just sort of the what seems to be more core values of a younger generation, and how what you've observed 6 months in is different about your younger colleagues that you're working with.
Yeah, so I'm Gen X and I'm old school. So I'll take it back to Whitney Houston, where she said, "I believe the children are our future." I legit assimilate and assign to that. We listen to our employees in a way that I've never experienced in the business world. We listen to the next generation that's building new media behavior, new digital behavior, new ways of communication and speed of communication. And so what I think we allow for is a non-hierarchical, flat organization, which is also very typical at a tech company. But here, what we allow that to do is inform and build. We are not proud inside. Our ByteDance values are humble and open and honest. And so what we do is ask people for their leadership, their thinking, their opinions. We've hired some incredible talent. I mean, stellar thinkers here. And so we give them the floor and we pass the mic on the teams. And we, in essence, listen to what they want to be built for their speed, for their habits, for their communication patterns. And we just try to accordingly match the product market fit internally and externally to the next generation, because they've grown up with more data than any generation in its past. They've grown up more multicultural than any generation in its past. They've grown up more connected to content than any of us have ever had. And so as we think about the people that work here, they're going to lead the next digital media behaviors. They're going to lead the next set of business building principles and practices and product. So we're not too proud. We're not a bunch of executives that think we know everything and we're sitting in an ivory tower. We're the ones that are sitting there saying, I am probably the farthest removed from the next generation of media. So tell me what's going on and keep me cool and let me know what's happening. And I do. I mean, I legitimately sit there and I'm like, I am not going to preach. I have experience and I have practice. So I will be the bumpers and guide. But you will be the ones that tell me what to do. And you will be the ones that tell us what to build. And then we'll actually be doing it right. So we're very democratic here. And it is culturally embedded and rooted in not only the leadership, but all the way down to the I'd say entry-level employees we hire.
How far is that gone within the company in terms of speaking to TikTok's its activities outside of the core, production of the app and selling ads into it? What I mean is, social, environmental impact of the companies, where the topic that employees are increasingly speaking out about. You've seen other companies like Coinbase and Basecamp come out and say, that workplace is not for political debate. I don't want to hear it. And I think this is in response to largely the Gen Z workers in companies like those, and I'm sure at TikTok, thinking that no, this is a big part of what a company needs to care about and respond to, not just the code that runs the app. How has that played out so far within TikTok?
Sure. First and foremost, we're really proud of our TikTok for Good platform. There's a lot of positive light being dropped into the marketplace that is done at a corporate enterprise ByteDance level, and it's dropping all the way into our TikTok for Good. Everything from supporting the pandemic with medicines and oxygen tanks in countries that are really hurting right now, all the way through to how can we give a platform to NGOs. And it's not because it's cultural corporate pressure. It literally is because we also are a company that's founded in the millennial culture that grew up with needing purpose and needing to use our superpowers for good. And so for us, it's about, we want to walk the walk as much as we talk the talk. And our employees are looking not for a job, but looking for a place that they can feel good about contributing to. And this next generation of business professionals and leaders are looking for accountability as well as integrity. And I absolutely respect that, because we don't want to fix our organization in a few years from now. We don't want to fix our numbers in corporate social responsibility, in sustainability, in diversity. We want to build the right infrastructures and shapes for that now. And so we want to go to bed every night, and we do go to bed every night feeling really good about what we've got going on in here, because the right values are leading the way, and the generation that demands integrity and accountability works here and drives that agenda with us. So it feels really good to build what we're building. And again, it's to build it such that we are on the right side of history and not necessarily finding ourselves fixing anything in a few years from now.
I was reading an interview you did recently in which you talked about multiculturalism as a trait of yours, and one to look to in others for a more versatile, strong career. But you define multiculturalism a little differently than others might. Do you mind walking us through that?
Sure. So I think, listen, I'm a brown girl from New York City with a potentially Jewish last name and a strange first name that people often think I'm a man walking into a room, because they can't really tell what I'm from, where I'm from. And I grew up in a melting pot where I didn't see color, culture, race. I spoke multiple languages because I just had to with my friends from school. And so multicultural has always been something that was deeply embedded into my being and my day-to-day, but I define it quite differently and not as classically traditional as multicultural by way of culture. I define multicultural as being accepting of many global cultures, countries, tribes, languages. Multicultural is the opportunity that we have with the interwebs, as I lovingly call them, that have allowed us to be connected. So we've all grown up, over 42% of Gen Z currently have friends and report that they have friends who live in different countries. So we've already naturally been multicultural for some time now. I also define multicultural as working for a non-American tech company. I didn't realize it, Zach, but I had actually never worked for an American tech company.
Oh, where Spotify was
Spotify is
where you
Sweden.
came from before. Yeah.
And ByteDance is culturally founded in China. So I didn't realize that I wasn't necessarily inducted into the tech space in a non-American tech culture and values. So multicultural to me has always been corporately, that this is a company that has many people living in many different countries, many different places with potentially more diverse values, and not necessarily typical American values that we may just assume as we come to work every day. And then finally, I'd say multicultural for me is about being multi-hyphenate. And that's almost indicative of even my own career, where it is about bringing multiple skill sets, multiple knowledge and experiences, and moving from specialist conversations to potentially more generalist conversations, or at least multi-hyphenate conversations, such that I am creative and media and platform and tech. And so what I'm looking to do, and what we are looking to do as a multicultural platform and organization, are draw upon the different skills and interests and user needs of our brands, agencies, and user base, so that we can show up as a well-rounded version of ourselves. And so multicultural for me has always taken multi-dimensional shape, and diversity and inclusion is certainly at the root of that, but it's not where that conversation stops for me.
For one, it's a more complicated and richer question when you're talking about diversity and inclusion at a global level. For we're a much smaller company, of course, but Quartz is half have our companies outside the U.S. and even like traditional reporting on race doesn't use conforming to U.S. standards for race just doesn't work for describing the kind of workforce we have. And I imagine TikTok and lots of other multinational corporations. I'd be curious though, what is, do you think, the biggest difference for the sort of multicultural tech companies that you're describing, whether it's Spotify or TikTok, as compared to the classic American tech companies? I know you don't have the opposite experience, but what do you see at least as the advantages from the companies that you have worked for?
So I can't speak to it in comparison, but what I can speak to is just a nod and respect for our technology and even our algorithm, such that it is personally grafted, it is content grafted, it's not socially grafted. So when you think about multicultural and you think about grafting to content and not to networks of friends and family, you're automatically bringing more of the world into yours. And so as we think about people who may potentially be bilingual like myself and speak in other languages, I could potentially be getting cultural content that is in language that may fall outside of my borders, because language travels regardless of geography. And so we like to think about culture by way of language and not necessarily borders. We like to think about culture by way of content and not necessarily social spheres, right? We are a content and entertainment platform, not a social platform. And so as you think about how do we take that as competitive advantage inside through our algorithm, the content graph, again, brings much, much more of a democratic world into yours. So that's more curated, if you would, from everyone else outside of our friends and families than some of the other platforms that we were used to growing up with.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, when I first started using TikTok, and I pretty quickly had a great experience on the For You page, and I figured, it was, I was only getting half the experience because I didn't have any actual friends on the app, and later learned that in fact that's sort of the core of experience, and that matching. Is your critique essentially like social media in its first wave or second wave, I don't know what we call it, let's call it the Facebook era, was intended to realize the promise of the internet of connecting everyone together, but because it's built in a social graph, it's inherently limited. You can have friends on the other side of the world, but
Right.
most people's natural social graph is pretty small and geographically limited. Your argument is when you start connecting people by common interests and topics, of course, there's still geography involved, but you're more likely to get a more how would you describe it? A more diverse, more geographically spread out experience?
Diverse and democratized. I would describe it as diverse and democratized. And I think interests and mindset show up much more than demographic and social graph do.
That's interesting. So flipping now to your day job, speaking this language to agencies and advertisers, coming to TikTok. I mean, for one, I have to imagine explain some of what you were just talking about. But how do you talk to advertisers about what's different about TikTok? And I'm sure it's many things, but what's the main selling point? Is it along the generational lines? Like, this is where to find Gen Z? Is it the argument you were just making about not being based on a social graph, or what is the key selling point?
I mean, it is an education. I wouldn't classify it as a selling point as much as I would classify it as an education. And I make the distinction because there is so much more to learn about the new communication skills of the next generation of our buyers and the next generation of our media mavens, if you would. They're shaping. TikTok is built by Gen Z for Gen Z. So in essence, we're just enabling existing behavior that's coming up from the next generation. So our education lies in a number of different pillars. It depends on your level of sophistication of TikTok. And every marketer is different, right? So some marketers are, I lovingly go back to an old reference of some marketers are at a horse, some are at a car, and some are at a race car. And there is a spectrum of comfort level. But first and foremost, we tell marketers to just dive in, because there's a language, there's a level of engagement and action that comes with it. And there's also an understanding of subcultures where we try to help break marketers out of endemic space, because people may just be in learning mode, whether that's how to make a smoky eye in a beauty category or how to make a recipe in a food category. So it's a very diverse set.
Well, and I think the enormous power of TikTok for marketing, but also its paradox is just naturally the app is driving so much consumer behavior even before a single marketing dollar is spent. Yeah. Just because users showing off latest eyeliner or what have you are driving sales, whether they've been paid to show off that eyeliner or not. So how do you then advise a marketer trying to make their way into that ecosystem, think about the organic aspects of their marketing strategy on TikTok, what they should be paying for, how they can be authentic in the middle of that when they probably don't, if it's in their heart of hearts, understand it. What's the advice there?
Sure. First and foremost, I love that efficacy is back. And I do, and I love that marketing can be native again. And so we're not full circle, but we are able to bring some of the storytelling elements and the brand building elements that we've all grown up with as marketing professionals. So your product is going to sell if it works. Your services are going to be seeing massive volume when it works. And that's what the beauty of the platform is the advocacy that we get from our creator group is really just embracing something that has meaning and actual impact in their lives. And that's the ultimate goal of our products and services that we develop. So we look at our marketing colleagues and our agency friends and family, and what we in essence tell them to do is just get in the game. Put your brands and products and services, engage in the dialogue, because the product and the services will speak for themselves. And so be part of the community's natural behaviors and rhythm. Be part of what they're doing to share, detail. Anything from TikTok made me buy it, which I can't tell you how much stuff I bought off TikTok, all the way through to just myth busting. And so product efficacy and storytelling is alive and well on the platform. And so leaning into the truths of the product, the meaningful impact that the products have on our consumers' lives, really bringing product market fit back into the conversation and not just messaging is what allows some of our marketers to be as successful, because people can relate to it because it's real. And realness is our currency. And so if it's real, then I trust it, then I move to purchase, not just consideration. And I think TikTok is very unique in being able to drive that.
Yeah, no, it's really striking. I'm suddenly very tempted to buy this small contraption that will make me one little shot of espresso with a burner underneath that I did not even know existed and had no interest in yesterday. But I may end up purchasing by the end of today.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, the last thing I bought, it's the stupidest thing, but it gives me so much joy, is a little mini laptop computer for my cat. And it's just the simplest thing, because my cat often walks across my laptop while I'm working. My whole company knows my cats. And so the smallest things that can create meaning and use inside homes are selling like crazy. And so what I would say is, most of why we're seeing so much success in our commerce space is because it's low cost and low consideration. So it's easy to click, but we will get to a point where those habits are so ingrained that we'll move to high cost, high consideration, still see the transaction. I completely hypothesize that will get there, because if and when something works and if and when something has value in your life, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, fair enough. Right. The first time I see one of those, I'm like, that looks like a cheap piece of shit that I don't need it. But when I order it and it works, that validates it. And I'll let you know whether the coffee works. But I definitely like the idea of a cat keyboard. Well, Khartoon, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with all, getting back to normalcy, or whatever that means at your company and in your life. Appreciate you coming on. I'll have you back on another time to see what it's like now when you're 18 months into the job.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us and for giving TikTok this platform. We really appreciate it, and just keep rooting for us from the sidelines.
Of course. Well, I think it is high time Quartz gets on TikTok, which I'm ashamed to say we don't have an institutional account there. So maybe that'll be our next thing. Thanks a lot. Have a great rest of the day.
You as well.
That's it for today's episode of Make Business Better, but we're here every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, follow us, well, not yet on TikTok, but on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and maybe soon enough, TikTok itself. I'll see you all here next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Have a great rest of the week.